Hey, what is going on, everybody? We are here with Dev Insights. We actually have 2 Dev Insights, and as I was recording it, a TWID came out. So I went and read that, then we're back here. So we have 3 articles to cover today. It's going to be a long one, so get ready, get your coffee. I know I have mine right now. I just made a fresh cup of coffee. So we'll get into it. We'll dive into some of these changes. The first article here, this is the biggest one. So as far as like probably the most impactful and the longest, this is like 9,000 words. There's some scary stuff in here, everyone, but I promise you we're going to be okay. We will be just fine. I think most of these changes are good for the game and they needed to happen. I think all of us expected it to happen at some point. Some are, might be kind of questionable, but we'll go ahead and dive into it. And there is a lot of math in here, a lot of numbers, percentages. And so I'm going to cover everything in as much detail as I feel is necessary. I might kind of skip over some parts that will like barely be noticeable differences. So I've gone through this article and yeah, so that's kind of your warning out of the way. But the first thing here is actually kind of a big deal. So this is Frost Armor. Frost Armor is the new like stasis resist, kind of like woven mail, how we have that over on Strand. With Frost Armor, they did kind of mention this about, seems like it was about a year ago or something like that, where they said, hey, we're going to let you know more about Frost Armor. We're going to make stasis a little bit more survivable. So that's kind of their answer here. How it works is this is obviously going to reduce damage from combatants, 4.5% per stack in PvE and 2% in PvP. It stacks up to 5 times by default and it lasts 9 seconds. So it's going to show up as a buff on your screen. But with Whisper of, Whisper of Rhyme, they're reworking this fragment here. If you have that equipped, that's going to extend it from 9 seconds to 13 seconds, and it increases your maximum stacks up to, it increases your maximum stacks up to 8. So I think that ends up being a 36% damage reduction in PvE. That's mainly what we're concerned about today. I don't think, it probably will be pretty viable in PvP. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to actually acquire those stacks. There's some different ways that we can get Frost Armor stacks. We'll go over that here in a second, but that's kind of what you need to know about Frost Armor. The next thing, which kind of ties into Frost Armor as well, is all of the stasis aspects on each class that generate stasis shards. Kind of switching up how stasis shards work here. So we have the Grim, Tectonic, and Glacial Harvest, each one of those, 1 per class. Those are the ones right now, which you have to have those equipped in order to generate stasis shards. Now they're obviously removing that, but they're improving the stasis shard potency when you have those aspects equipped, which is kind of cool. So when you have those equipped, they will generate a small amount of health and 1 stack of Frost Armor. So I think most people will probably still have those equipped anyway, but I think 99% of stasis builds, you're going to have Grim, Tectonic, or Glacial Harvest equipped right now because you just want to get those stasis shards, right? And so that is how that works. I should also mention too that the Frost Armor is replacing the it mentioned it up here on Whisper of Rhyme. It's replacing the stasis shard overshield. So you know how the you would use Whisper of Conduction to get the shards to track to you, and then Whisper of Rhyme would get you overshield. That's going away. So when Void 3.0 came out, we had the Void overshield, which is actually different in functionality to stasis shard overshield. So it's pretty confusing. A lot of people don't even know that. And so now overshields are just gone in stasis. You're only going to get those on Void. Large stasis shards from Grim Harvest will grant more health and more Frost Armor stacks. Nice. Tectonic Harvest, I do like this change. This is something that should have been in the game. We'll probably say that quite a bit in this article. But Tectonic Harvest on Titan will now create a stasis shard when shattering a frozen target, in addition to shattering stasis crystals. So a big part of the Titan gameplay loop when you're running Behemoth is you want to break as many stasis crystals as you can. Now frozen enemies count as stasis crystals, so they will also generate a stasis shard for you, which is kind of nice when you're running Tectonic Harvest, that is. Okay, so our intention is that Frost Armor can be granted through a variety of sources. So what they're saying here, we have the Renewal Grasps, that's the gauntlets on Hunter, and then the Balador's Wraithweavers on Warlock. Those will also work with Frost Armor. So instead of like when you're rocking Renewal Grasps on Hunter, when you throw that Duskfield grenade, you stand within the grenade. Now you're not going to get the generic like resist buff that I think it was like 25%. Now you get stacks of Frost Armor, so it just synergizes with stasis. Same thing with the Wrathweavers. Cool. We have a new fragment here called Whisper of Chill. Stasis weapon final blows have a chance to create a stasis shard. I do like that. We actually have a couple new fragments here. Whisper of Chains no longer grants passive damage resistance when near a stasis crystal or frozen target. I think so. This one is kind of like a linear buff. It's not really a nerf or a buff. They just kind of changed how it works. Instead, now it's going to grant a chance to create a stasis shard when defeating a target while you have one or more stacks of frost armor. We need to test this out. Depending on how easy frost armor is to generate, this might be a good or bad fragment. I don't know yet, but I guess we'll see. Whisper of Fractures now grants a stack of frost armor when you shatter any frozen target with a melee attack. Whisper of Torment, long story short, we got percentages here. It's going to just get you more grenade energy. And then it's going to give you even more grenade energy when you're taking damage while you have frost armor. So I like that. Whisper of Torment seems like it might be pretty strong. Whisper of Reversal, this is our second new fragment here for stasis. While you have frost armor, dealing or receiving physical melee damage slows your victim or attacker. So you're kind of like embodying stasis fully, where someone punches you, they freeze. I kind of like that. It's cool. All right, Shattering is getting a huge buff. I think people really liked how Shatter worked in the artifact this season. So they're increasing base PvE shatter damage from 200 to 400, so double the damage. And then they have like a couple fixes in here. Not going to worry about that too much. Warlocks, long story short, they said they're kind of exactly where they like it, but they did buff Ice Flare bolts a little bit. They increased the number of seekers created before going on cooldown from 5 to 7. Hunters, there are some more changes here. You can see this is kind of a bigger section. So Winter's Shroud, this is the aspect that when you dodge, it's going to freeze enemies that are nearby. This one now has kind of a changed ability, I guess, where slowing targets briefly increases your class ability regeneration rate. So now grants PvE damage reduction while activated. While you freeze enemies, you're going to replenish your class ability. So it almost is like a little gameplay loop within that one aspect. I'm not a huge fan of that one, but we'll see. Maybe after testing, it'll be pretty cool. The Touch of Winter aspect, also on Hunter, got buffed, but in my opinion, if you're playing Stasis Hunter, at least the way I like to play, you want to be using Renewal Grasps, which doesn't the Duskfield Grenade is not getting buffed here at all. It's still very good. I just don't know how often as a Stasis Hunter you're going to be using Glacier Grenade or Cold Snap Grenade, but those did get some small buffs there. Silence and Squall, the Hunter Super, actually did get a pretty cool buff here. So the travel speed by 10%, you're never going to notice that. 10% is so minimal, but it's going to have better tracking, essentially, is how that works. And then the PvE damage and slow tick rate is increased by 40%. So you get a 40% buff to damage and freeze time. So basically enemies will freeze in half a second, which is down from 0.8 seconds. Really cool. Okay, Titans for Behemoth players, several quality of life improvements. I don't think that these are as impactful. I think the Hunters are probably going to be more noticeable, but the first one we have here is Shiver Strike. I think Shiver Strike is probably the worst melee in the game, or one of the worst. I do not like using it at all. I'm only using Shiver Strike when I'm trying to break those stasis crystals. I never use it to target enemies, but they did give it a 10% buff. Again, 10% is just so tiny. 10% damage buff, but the tracking is going to be a lot better. So that's all you need to know there. Glacial Quake now automatically begins sprinting when the player throttles forward. Small change there. Little change to Cryoclasm here. I don't use Cryoclasm, but I know a lot of people do like it. That's the where you slide melee up and then a bunch of stasis crystals appear. They removed the sprint time requirement. Cryoclasm now goes on cooldown for 4 seconds after one extended slide. But I do like, this is my favorite change for Stasis Titans. We have some changes to the Diamond Lance just to make them function a little bit better. So the blast radius, whether you throw it or you slam it, that's going to be improved. So wider blast radius, pretty significant. It's about 20%, 25% or so. And then stasis or Diamond Lances will shatter stasis crystals. So when you toss a Diamond Lance at it, now it's going to destroy it. For some reason before it did not do that. I do like that. And then the pickup interaction time, we're not going to worry about that. It's just, they're going to feel better, long story short. And here we go, guys. This is where people are going to start freaking out. It's okay. Get your coffee, just take a quick sip, relax. But we have nerfs to Well of Radiance, pretty hard nerfs, I'm going to be honest. And so you guys let me know what you think about this. But Ward of Dawn is getting some changes and buffs to how it works. Here's what's happening. So after reading their thought process behind it, Well of Radiance needed a little bit more of an identity instead of just being the go-to solve every problem super, right? So you use it for when you're doing damage against a boss, you're in the DPS phase, pop a well, everybody's invulnerable, you just turn your brain off, you do DPS. It's also it's crazy good for tanking damage, for healing, for dealing more damage. You get the radiant buff, so everyone does 25% more damage. It generates orbs. Like every single time you have that warlock that is just the well guy, and now they're kind of removing that. So, and here we go. So these are the exact changes that are taking place. Well of Radiance, this is the first buff. So it's going to grant an 8 seconds of radiant when you exit the well. So even after you leave, you're still going to have radiant. So that's kind of telling us like, hey, maybe we should get ready to start moving around during damage phases and not just planting down, right? So that is nice. We have reduced player survivability. So this is where the nerfs come in. So the healing gets reduced from 100 health points per second to 50 health points per second, which will match restoration times 2. So you will absolutely not be able to just sit in a well anymore. Enemies will hurt really bad, especially on contest mode raids. Nothing will be safe. You're going to want a Ward of Dawn, it looks like, and we'll go over that in a second. But kind of a buff here. So they're going like nerf buff, kind of confusing. But the heal on cast, you get 300 HP, so instant max health. I guess that's kind of a nice panic button thing. But the bosses, they reduce the damage resistance that we normally have. So we normally have 40% damage resistance to like Nezarec or something. If you're in Root of Nightmares, Nezarec is swiping you with a glaive. You have 40% damage reduction. Now you have 10. So that is really, really low. So you will be taking way more damage and healing a lot less. What this is meant to do is just make Well of Radiance more of a damage focused super, outgoing damage focused super with a little bit of healing instead of just the invulnerability. Everyone has to use it type thing, or you have to have a Well of Radiance on your team type thing. We have one more orb that can appear here. I don't think that's a big deal. And now let's go over Ward of Dawn. So they're changing how Armor of Light works. So they removed the Armor of Light overshield, which I guess was different than the Void overshield. So now it's just a Void overshield. Armor of Light now instead grants additional damage resistance to players while inside the Ward of Dawn. So 30% in PvP, 60% in PvE. Your health remains roughly the same, they said. So inside the well, you're going to be pretty tanky. But what's cool is allies near the Ward of Dawn now have a Void overshield trickled on over time, similar to the volume behind a Bastion barricade. So all you have to do is stand near the bubble and you're going to get a replenishing Void overshield. So this is kind of cool because this is making me think like, hey, we put the Well of Radiance in front and then the bubble behind. We used to do that because the bubble actually used to give us a bigger damage buff outward than they nerfed it. But you get your Armor of Light, so you tank up a little bit, you stand next to it, you get the Void overshield, and then you're in the well as well, so you do more outgoing damage. I think that's kind of a cool idea. It creates more use for the Void Titan, which is just literally never used in PvE anymore. So I like that. Here's kind of a nerf. So we don't get Weapons of Light by default. That is now getting added to the Helm of Saint 14. So Helm of Saint 14 is getting reworked a little bit. You get Weapons of Light with that as well, which Weapons of Light, I believe, is just a 20% damage buff. You can create additional orbs. I don't care about that. All right, so that was a lot. But now we're going to go over, we have Arc, Solar, Void, and Strand left over. So let's go over, we're kind of going to rapid fire these. We don't have like massive changes here. So some changes to Hunter here. I don't think they're going to be very noticeable, like decreased cooldown from 100 seconds to 90 seconds. Not very noticeable. Warlock gets some changes to the size of the ball lightning, melee attack, and then the chain lightning, the base damage gets doubled. Cool. Titan Thunderclap, you get additional damage resistance versus PvE combatants when activated. I don't think anyone's ever going to use this in PvP. You shouldn't. But increase the maximum or the minimum damage by 20% and the maximum damage by 30%. So as you're winding it up at minimum, if you just tap your melee button, it's going to do 20% more damage. If you fully charge it, it's going to do 33% more damage than it does now. So kind of a stacking multiplier, and increase the maximum damage versus enemy players by 14%. So again, I personally would never recommend using Thunderclap in PvP. It just takes too long, too much of a wind up. There are some changes to Knockout here. So increased bonus damage granted to powered melee attacks versus PvE combatants from 25 to 50%. So that's a sizable buff to Knockout. They reworked the healing behavior, so no longer unstuns health regeneration on melee defeats. Now instantly grants a chunk of healing that scales with the type of target defeated. So you can see here, they kind of split it up depending on what enemy you defeat, you get more health back. So if you melee a champion, for example, you get 100 HP back. I like how it scales there. Touch of Thunder, we have our first buff to the Storm Grenade in terms of Titan. There's another like overall Storm Grenade buff, but the increased tracking travel speed when targeting PvE combatants got increased a little bit. Storm Grenades used to be completely busted like a year and a half ago. You could just toss a Storm Grenade with Heart of Inmost Light. It would do tons of damage. You would dodge or use your like thruster ability, pop your melee, and then you would instantly have another Storm Grenade. You just like launch them out. It was a lot of fun. Storm Grenades took a huge nerf going into Lightfall. I think it was around Lightfall. So this is not going to bring them anywhere near where they were, but at least there's some sort of buff to Storm Grenades because I do miss those. Keeping with Touch of Thunder, the Lightning Grenade was a little bit too powerful, apparently. I think that was more of a PvP thing. I personally never use Lightning Grenades. It's all about those Pulse Grenades. But here we go. These are the generic. This applies to every single class. So Storm Grenades increased damage to PvE combatants by 20%. So on Titan, you have increased travel speed and a 20% damage buff. All other classes get a 20% damage buff. And then Skip Grenades, Arc Bolt Grenades get a 15% damage buff as well. And then we have some Arc Fragment changes. So Spark of Recharge, ability regeneration bonus now persists until the player returns to full shields, rather than deactivating as soon as shields begin to recharge. So that's a little buff there. Spark of Beacons also gets buffed. So it not only works with Arc special weapons, it will work with Arc power ammo weapons as well. So that's kind of nice. Any Arc weapon basically will trigger Spark of Beacons. And for Spark of Frequency, it grants 15 weapon stability on a powered melee hit in addition to its reload benefit. Kind of cool. I don't ever use Spark of Frequency, but there you go. And for Solar here, starting off with Hunters, the lightweight knife now has 2 melee charges by default. So they're kind of looking at its position into how it should fit into the melee ecosystem. The throw animation speed was increased by 33%, and then reduced suppression time between throws. Basically, you can just fire those off really quick back to back. So there you go. Knock them down, reduced internal cooldown on throwing knife from 1 second to 0.2 seconds. Cool. Golden Gun Marksman. All these numbers here just tell you that you cannot spam the Golden Gun glitch, where all 6 Guardians are rocking Golden Gun, you're firing them off, and then you instantly get your super back. Fire off Golden Guns again. Not going to be able to do that anymore. So there you go. Titans, they worked with Consecration here. So because the Consecration aspect is actually a part of Prismatic, they want it to work with Stasis Crystals because we're going to be able to generate Stasis Crystals in Prismatic. So there you go. Ignitions generated by Consecration now deal 20% additional damage to PvE combatants. Like that. And then there's a couple bug fixes here as well. And then Hammer of Soul gets a little bit of a change. They're basically saying that you only use Hammer of Soul when you're in a sunspot created by Soul Invictus. They kind of worked to where you don't have to crutch on Soul Invictus that hard, but there you go if you like Hammer of Soul. Swarm Grenades also get a little bit of a damage buff as well, 20%, and they will work a little bit better too. So a larger size, 4 to 6 meters. And then we have Void. So Night Stalkers are generally in a pretty strong place. I agree. Void Hunter is very good. If you have a good Void Hunter on your team, you're probably going to defeat whatever activity you're in, especially Grandmasters. But there are a couple changes, actually buffs, like Snare Bomb gets a little bit of a buff here. You get the linger duration for a Smoke Bomb, which lasts 5 seconds instead of 3. And then same thing with Trapper's Ambush, get a little bit of increased time there as well. Stylish Executioner's Weaken effect can now be applied by glaive melee attacks. Who is using a glaive still? I'm curious. Let me know. For Sentinels, we've focused a large consistency pass for the shield throw melee attack. We want it to feel weighty and impactful. Our previous passes have not done enough to make it able to deal damage with large groups of minor combatants. So this is kind of cool. So the bounce count has increased from 4 to 5, so it gets an extra ricochet. The lifespan, it actually lasts for an extra second now, so that's 25% more time. Cool. And then better tracking, slightly increased gravity and decreased thrust speed with each bounce. It's just better tracking. That's all that means. And then we get a 20% damage buff to the shield throw. So guys, I hope that Void Titans or Void in general is in the artifact. I would love to have a Void season. I would love to go into a raid with a Ward of Dawn. Like, how cool would that be? They're also making a change to Offensive Bulwark. So Offensive Bulwark, you can now only extend the Void Overshield's timer to its normal maximum duration to prevent an issue where players could get into a bad timer state. I've never experienced that. I don't know what that is. But it now regenerates a small portion of your active Void Overshield with each melee defeat. So a little buff there. And finally, our Void Warlocks. Chaos Accelerant getting a little bit of a buff. It was not where they wanted it to be. So the Chaos Accelerant Charge Magnetic Grenade increases maximum intensity of physics knockback by 10%. Not going to be noticeable, but we do get a 20% damage buff versus PvE combatants. Pocket Singularity increased detonation damage versus PvE combatants by 50%, which is huge. And then Nova Bomb, the Cataclysm variant, increased seeker count from 4 to 6. That will make Cataclysm a little bit more powerful. Vortex Nova Bomb gets increased from 7 seconds to 10 seconds. And yeah, I think overall these are pretty good buffs to Void. I think that was much needed. I think we could have used a little bit more. We'll see how good the Ward of Dawn buff is, as was mentioned in detail, but yeah, I like it. And then Strand subclasses. Guys, we have some nerfs coming to Strand. So again, get another sip of coffee, because this is brutal, especially for my Strand Titan bros out there. We're gonna suffer for a little bit, but I promise you we will make it through. Thread of Warding. Reduced woven mail duration on an orb of power pickup from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. So we are going to constantly have to be running around and picking up orbs. That is huge. I do crutch on the 10 seconds quite often. Like 5 seconds, you will always have to be looking for an orb. So yeah, big nerf there. Hunters, they reduced the ensnaring slam detonation radius from 8 meters down to 6.5 meters. So I think this is more of a PvP thing. It was a little bit too powerful. Threaded spike got reduced damage. So the hunter melee reduced damage. Bummer. It's not that bad. Like 79 to 70 is not horrible. I don't think that's no one's gonna notice that. Weaver's Call added a new behavior. Defeating a target with strand damage now has a chance to generate a perched threadling with a higher chance of generation from defeating more powerful targets. This damage can be from any source, including other threadlings. All right, so Strand Titans, grapple melees. Unfortunately, I think we all saw this coming. It is the most broken thing in the game, one of the most broken things that's ever been in Destiny, where you can do like 340,000 DPS. It's like double or triple anything else in the entire game, where you get your Syntheseps or your Worm Gods equipped, you get the Navigator, shoot a Navigator bubble in the sky, grapple melee the boss, and you can solo one-phase raid bosses. I've seen some crazy things happening. That's gone from the game. So what's happening here is grappling to a tangle will no longer instantly refresh your grapple. It's going to basically increase the amount of seconds every time you grapple to it. So it says it increases the maximum duration to 5 seconds per grapple, reducing to a maximum of 1 second added after 5 consecutive grapples to the same grapple tangle. Okay, so we're not going to be able to just spam grapple melee as often because of that cooldown there. So it is a little bit confusing reading that. I want to test exactly how that works in game, but from what they're saying, you're just not going to be able to do that anymore. And that's not the only nerf that's coming to Strand Titan melees, because yeah, here we go. Get ready, guys. Into the Fray got a nerf. So now the melee regeneration speed goes from 4x to 3x. So 25% less melee damage regenerated. That's unfortunate because we love meleeing as a Strand Titan. Banner of War, maximum timer gets reduced down to 24 seconds. I don't think that's going to be as noticeable because Banner of War is still very, very easy to generate. So I think Banner of War will still be good, but here's where the problem is. Melee, glaive melee, and super damage bonus will now have diminishing returns with Syntheseps as follows. Melee bonuses from 1.4x to 1.15x. So essentially, that 40% damage multiplier is getting dropped down to 15% just with Syntheseps, just on Strand Titan. The same thing for Worm Gods, goes from 1.4x to 1.1, so 10% on Worm Gods. So yeah, no more one-shotting majors on like Grandmasters. You can't do that anymore. It's just not going to be possible. I think Syntheseps are finally going to be out of the meta for Strand Titan. We're going to have to use something else. So get ready, everybody. We're going to change our builds. And then Frenzy Blade, reduce the forward offset for melee lunge target point from 0.4 meters to 0.18 meters. So yeah, just another nerf. Like you won't be able to save yourself as often, it sounds like. The lunge range is shorter. So guys, that is everything. That was a lot. That was our longest article yet. We're going to move right into the next dev article here, which is the armor tuning preview. So let's get into it. A lot of these changes are coming from the place of Prismatic is coming out, and there are some exotics that need to match that Prismatic verbiage and the gameplay loop. So they're kind of making it work with our Prismatic subclasses that are going to have a lot of different elements to them. I think last year we had a lot more exciting exotic changes. Maybe I need to go through this again, but after reading it, I don't see anything that is like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the new meta. So we'll see here. But Triton Vice, that is the glaive hunter one. It no longer requires you to match the glaive to your subclass to trigger the extra detonations. Because of Prismatic, you're going to have all different kinds of subclasses there. So it's just general. It says glaive projectile final blows now will always trigger a detonation that matches the glaive's damage type. So not your subclass type, even when the glaive does not match the equipped subclass. So overall buff to that. The surrounded effect provided by Triton Vice while wielding a glaive now lingers on the player for 5 seconds after no longer being surrounded. So interesting. I wonder how many people will be using this. I bet no one. Dragon's Shadow will now work with Ensnaring Slam or the new Ascension Arc aspect. If you haven't seen those, go check those out on YouTube. They have released kind of what those are. So yeah, more build crafting combinations. Foe Tracer gets kind of the Triton Vice treatment here in that it'll work with more stuff. So it now grants it grants the bonus damage it inflicts on a target to weapons as well, and not just abilities. That's how I'm understanding that. The damage type also matches that of the ability used to damage that target instead of always matching your equipped subclass. So you're not going to be locked to same weapon, same subclass type anymore, which is nice. With Prismatic, you can equip a variety of different damage elements with your abilities. Yep, we know that. We wanted to add an additional benefit to the 6th Coyote along with the Armamentarium for Titans, since otherwise the Spirit of Coyote perk on the new exotic. And okay, before we go ahead here, what this means is just to recap how exotic class items work. If you ever see Spirit of Coyote, so like right here it says Spirit of Coyote, that means that it's taking the trait or the exotic trait from the 6th Coyote exotic. So same thing like Spirit of Syntheseps would take it from the Syntheseps exotic. Okay, you get it. The actual exotic, so the 6th Coyote itself, will always be like more powerful than the spirit version because you're getting 2 spirit versions per exotic class item. So I can't remember the exact one, but it might be like Spirit of Coyote and Spirit of Syntheseps on the same exotic piece. It's not going to have like max power of both on the exotic class item. So I hope that makes sense. The actual exotic armor will be more powerful. So what they're doing to make 6th Coyote more powerful here is you will get a free copy of the Reaper's mod effects. So when you use your class ability, you get a kill with a weapon, an orb of power generates. So it's like a small buff, but it is something there. We already talked about the Renewal Grasp earlier on, where these will work with a Frost Armor stasis keyword and not the like resist ×4. Star Eater scales are getting changed a little bit, where the max Star Eater power will go from 4 to 6. So right now you max out your stacks at 4. They're changing that to 6, and then they reduce the increased super energy gain per orb of power when Golden Gun is equipped from 2 down to 0.5%. I think that's relating to the 6 Golden Gun nerf, so you don't get as much super energy back. Okay, and Titan, we updated the Ursa Furiosa to improve the new Void aspect Unbreakable in addition to its previous effects. So Unbreakable is the one where basically you are, as a Void Titan, you're able to kind of charge and tank damage, and then use that, like however much damage you receive, you can like almost push and damage enemies away. It's actually really sick. But that's also going to work with Ursa Furiosa. So that's getting a buff basically. So now it provides increased movement speed while guarding with Unbreakable. So as you're kind of tanking damage, more movement speed, and it grants super energy while guarding with Unbreakable. So I like that as well. So it kind of takes what it already does with the Sentinel and puts it on the new aspect, Unbreakable aspect. Eternal Warrior no longer requires an arc subclass for arc final blows to grant its escalating arc weapon damage bonus. This allows it to synergize with prismatic more easily. So again, another one of those. So you can basically have like a solar subclass with an arc weapon and Eternal Warrior equipped. You're still going to get that Eternal Warrior benefit where you're getting that 25% bonus damage or like ×4 surge, whatever that is. Armamentarium, that's the Titan chest piece that gives you 2 grenades, will be updated with an additional benefit beyond getting a second grenade charge. It now creates orbs of power from final grenade blows. So basically here we get a free copy of firepower on our armamentarium. Pretty easy. Kepri's Horn, getting a cool buff. I've always thought that this helmet looked really cool. It's just, I've never used it a single time, but this is the one where you pop your class ability, it launches out kind of like the Abeyant Leap Strand one, where it launches out like a solar projectile. They're doubling its damage, and now the Solar Blast will scorch each time it hits its target instead of scorching only once. And it also benefits from the Ember of Eruption and Ember of Ashes fragments. So cool. Heart of Inmost Light, all they're doing here is they're removing the 3 buffs that it usually says down to just one generic buff, so it's not going to take up all the buffs on your screen. Syntheseps nerf here, so reduce the amount of time. So bionic enhancements will only stick around for 5 seconds instead of 8. So that is an overall that applies not just to Strand, that's every single class or every single subclass. Severance Enclosure, I did not even know that this is a problem, but apparently it had some weird functionality. We reduced the knockback intensity of these explosions. No one's using Severance Enclosure right now, at least that I know. So not a huge change. Warlock, they are making Mantle of Battle Harmony generate more super energy. That's a good change. The Wrath Weavers, we already went over this. This works with Frost Armor now. Secant Filaments, Empowering Rift will now reset a player's existing Devour buff back to 11 seconds when they enter it in addition to its previous behavior, so that's nice. Verity's Brow now requires final blows with a weapon matching your grenade's damage type instead of one matching your equipped subclass. This better supports using it on the prismatic subclass. Okay, so another one of those. Sunbracers, we got a nerf here. If you're a Sunbracers user, it's still going to be good. It's just not going to be as good. So they reduced the increased, they're basically making it to where instead of it taking 2 seconds to recharge, it takes 4. And the maximum amount of grenades you can throw while Sunbracers is active is 4 down from 5. So you still, like 4 solar grenades is a lot. It's just gonna, you won't be able to spam them as quickly. That's all. And then there's a Cenotaph nerf here, I think. I don't know how much it's gonna affect everybody. We don't typically run, like in raids, we're not gonna run with 2 Cenotaphs. I've never needed that much heavy ammo. But how it works now is you can have 2 Cenotaph Warlocks tag the same enemy and it duplicates the heavy bricks. So they're just removing that. That's all. Powered melee and armor effects. Okay, so they're kind of standardizing how powered melee works here. We are starting by updating the Severance Enclosure and Assassin's Cowl to only trigger their effects when a player spends a melee charge or uses a finisher to get a final blow. So right now with Assassin's Cowl, you don't have to kill the enemy, but it still counts as a powered melee final blow, or it still counts as a powered melee. So they're changing this. I'm going to need a little bit more testing on this to see exactly how it works, but that is that. Exotic Artifice Armor. So this is a huge update and there is like nothing on it. I mean, it's not huge, but it's just funny how it's like just casually thrown in here. All exotic armor will now be artificiable, if that's a word, where you're going to get an extra mod slot. If you're not familiar with Artifice Armor, you can get that from running master level dungeons. All exotic armor will be able to get this now once it's masterworked. So you get an extra slot that you can add +3 to whatever stat you want. So that's going to get you from that. If you're at 97 resilience and you would have the perfect build, now you can get to 100. Cool. It's going to cost 1 exotic cipher and 10,000 glimmer. Ammo Finder update. So I did not even know that this was a thing. All this is saying is that if you have an Ammo Finder mod right now and you're like, dude, I'm not getting any heavy ammo and I have, you know, triple heavy ammo finder, what is going on? There is a hidden, almost like a hidden tracker in the game that if you die, it resets that hidden tracker. So you have to build up, rack up kills again, and then a heavy brick will drop. So they're saying here, you could technically go, if you die at the right time every time, you could go like a whole raid without your heavy ammo finder ever proccing. So this will change to where it will work through your death. So no matter what, you're always going to end up getting that heavy ammo brick after a certain amount of time. And then another really, really great thing here, raid mods are awesome, but even the 1 energy that they cost is usually not worth it. For most builds, they're making raid armor mods free, but keep in mind you do have to have raid armor to slot in the raid armor mods, and it has to be raid armor from that raid that you're looking at. So it might be worth farming up like a raid armor set if you're looking to get the title done. Some of the raid armor mods can actually be pretty helpful to you. So go get yourself a raid armor set, masterwork it, and then you get a bunch of free mods you can put in there. Nice. All right, so that is 2 out of 3 articles. We're gonna move to the third one right here. This was today. This was like an hour after the last article that we just read came out. But we have a new Vidoc. I'm not gonna cover this. I started making like a live reaction to this, and then like it's really cool. I just did not have a lot to add to it in the moment, but you should absolutely check this out. Yep, this is part 2. That's tomorrow. And then we have the Pale Heart cinematic. Very cool. I'm not going to play it here because you should just go play it yourself. You want to experience that for yourself. I promise you. It's great, especially if you've played Destiny all these years. All right. So the raid race, guys, I'm going to be participating in this. I'm probably not going to get first place. I guarantee you I'm not going to get first place, but we're going to do our best to try and get at least, you know, top 500 would be kind of cool. Top 1000 would be kind of cool. But we have a team. We're all ready to go. We are locked in, and it's going to be a fun day on stream. So if you watch me for at least 2 hours, or any other Destiny 2 streamer, watch your favorite one. You don't have to watch me, but I will be live. You can earn this emblem, which is really cool. And then you have a different emblem, which the first one is available for any Destiny 2 streamer. I'm not cool enough. I'm not a Twitch Rivals creator. I don't think I am. I'm just going to say I'm not. I don't think I am. You can receive this emblem, which I think is actually cooler. So if you want to watch me for a couple hours, then bounce to someone else to get this emblem, feel free to do that. Or if you want to watch someone else the whole time, that's fine too. Oh, and there's also a Twitch badge if you watch 15 minutes of the Final Shape raid. This is going to be easy, and that Twitch badge you'll be able to have for your whole life. So you can always have that equipped to show everyone that you were there and you watched someone do the Final Shape raid for 15 minutes. That's not bad. This week we have more drops, which I'm thankful for because I still need to get some good rolls out of here. I don't have a shiny Edge Transit that I like yet, so I'm going to keep farming for one. So have fun. It's apparently significantly increased drop rates on all this stuff. Recapping the armor tuning and all that stuff that we just went over. All right, so Pathfinder. This is kind of the meat of the TWID today. This is the big new change that will be taking place. It's kind of consolidating different things that are already in the game now. So what is Pathfinder? Pathfinder is a brand new pursuit system that we're introducing in Destiny 2 that consolidates bounties, patrols, and weekly vendor challenges into one streamlined system that you can access anytime, anywhere via the director. So no more going to Zavala, picking up bounties, going to Shaxx, picking up bounties, then going to Drifter, picking up bounties, tracking which ones you need for a powerful engram once you complete 8. That is gone entirely. It's being replaced by this. When you open a Pathfinder, you'll be presented with 20 objectives divided into 5 tiers, leading to every Guardian's favorite thing, a big shiny loot. Big shiny loot. To reach said loot, you must complete objectives and claim them to form a path from the leftmost tier to the right. While you can progress through all objectives on a Pathfinder without restriction, you will need to claim at least one objective in each tier before you can claim an objective in the following tier. Every time you claim an objective, you will receive rewards progressing your path towards, and they do talk about the rewards down below. We'll get to that in just a second. This will progress your path toward the final reward and opening new potential paths. Building a path toward the final reward allows you to claim it, and claiming the final reward opens a new opportunity, resetting your Pathfinder, which will cost Glimmer. So, yep, cost Glimmer. It gives you a new set of objectives to complete and a new final reward to pursue. These new cards are built by using a mixture of authorial control and procedural generation, so once you start resetting, your cards will diverge from those of other Guardians. As long as you still have the Glimmer to do so, you can continue to reset your Pathfinder cards after claiming the final reward, so you can't just reset it before you finish it, as many times as you like each week, but the value of the final reward will diminish with the resets of your card to a point, but it looks like at weekly reset, all that will go back to normal so you can get your good reward. So, cool. Every Guardian will start with the same fresh card. So where is the Pathfinder? Final Shape will launch with 2 Pathfinders. So you have one called like the Ritual Pathfinder, and then the Pale Heart Pathfinder as part of the expansions campaign. So you got to have Final Shape in order to access the Pale Heart Pathfinder. Rituals Pathfinder provides you with a set of objectives that span across all of our ritual activities: Vanguard, Nightfall, Onslaught. Okay, Onslaught is counting as a ritual activity. I like that. That tells me that they are going to be expanding on Onslaught, maybe adding new maps. Maybe we get one with a Dread enemy race. That would be kind of cool. Gambit and Crucible. Some of these objectives can be completed in any of these activities, while others require you to dive into a specific ritual or mode. So if we go down to the ritual Pathfinder here, it looks like, so the snakes are obviously Gambit. This is Vanguard, this is Crucible, and these star ones look like they could be anything. So I think that's what they're saying. If you just want kind of a generic one that doesn't force you to play a certain game mode, you want to go for those star ones. At least that's what I'm seeing. And then this paragraph, it says anything in the Pale Heart Pathfinder will be kind of like similar to bounties or location-based objectives that you'd have to do. They don't want to talk about the Pale Heart too much right now. So they're saying, why is the Pathfinder? We had 4 core goals. The first one was consolidation, like we talked about earlier. D2 is an enormous game. It's very overwhelming for new players, of course. So a lot of pursuit systems have been added to the game over time, and these systems are accessed in a myriad of different ways that make it difficult for Guardians, experienced or not, to understand what they can be doing at any given point of time. Guardian ranks kind of helped with that last year, as far as like, hey, do this. This is how you get good at the game. This is what you should be focusing on. So just get your Guardian ranks done. That was a good start. This is kind of another good start to consolidating all of those ritual stuff where you're like, dude, what do I do in this game? How do I get better gear? This is going to show you how to do that. And also says here too, like, we spend way more time than we realize traveling between destinations, going to the tower, going to our vaults, going to different vendors. They're trying to just figure out, hey, how can we reduce this time so people could just play? Give them a simple thing to do so that they can get to playing the game. And I do like that. So this is the Destination Pathfinder, or the Pale Heart one. This is going to be tied to the Final Shape expansion. So you can see your first path through it. You get a redacted exotic. This is probably going to be, this might be like Red Death or something like that. We'll see, or one of those ones, Microcosm, that we saw in the trailers that have come out over the past couple days. So on your first path, you get a powerful tier 3 engram, which contains Pale Heart gear that will be armor or weapons, 1 rank of vendor reputation, and 25,000 XP. The second pass, so you reset it with Glimmer. You go back, you start at rank 1 all the way on the left. You get another exotic, it looks like. That's going to be a separate one. Another engram, more reputation, XP. And you can see here it kind of starts to dwindle a little bit. On the third path through, you get a Pale Heart engram, no exotic, so you just get the first 2. It might be worth it just to get the first 2. And then the repeatable one. You could just do these as many times as you want, and then you just get a World Legendary engram, some small rep, small XP. And this one, to my knowledge, from how I'm seeing it, this is not going to be on a weekly reset. That's just the ritual activity one. This is going to be one where you get the Pathfinder stuff done and you probably just don't touch it ever again once you get the exotics. And then these are kind of how they work. So calibrations directly replace bounties. Most common objective category. This is kind of ordering them from like the lowest time investment to the highest time investment here. So in the Pale Heart, defeat combatants of a certain faction. That's an example of one of these like calibrations or bounties. Simple stuff, we're familiar with that. And then we have field assignments. Players must go to locations in the Pale Heart and complete a custom encounter that only appears while the objective is active. So I'm thinking kind of like heroic patrol, something like that. There's a lot of redacted stuff here, but this is an example. In the Pale Heart, travel to Redacted and complete the Redacted event. So heroic patrol is what I'm thinking. And then we have ventures, obviously the most, I don't know, time consuming or the most difficult ones. These are going to be found at the end of your Pathfinder, right before the final reward. It says in the Pale Heart, progress through the Redacted activity and loot chests. I think this is going to be kind of like Wellspring. If you've played through Witch Queen, the Wellspring activity is like a 6 Guardian activity event and you claim the chest at the end. This is probably going to be that. There might be a few different ones in there, but that's the most similar thing I can think of here. Okay, so the Rituals Pathfinder here, we're going to go into detail here. They just talk about how they're replacing bounties directly. So it looks like we're just not going to be able to get bounties at those ritual vendors anymore. And then this next paragraph here kind of says that when there is weeks of like double Crucible XP or double Vanguard XP, it's going to kind of put more of those in the Pathfinder to make it easier, because obviously you want to run that stuff when it is double rewards. So then we have like rewards here. Your first 3 completions, you will get this. Your next 7 completions, it goes down, so you only get an enhancement prism. And then anything after, I mean, if you get 7 completions in a week, I think that's going to be kind of a lot. Like, you shouldn't be playing that many ritual activities. You just don't need to. But again, it is going to reset at that next weekly reset. So then they have some quest tab updates here. I'm not seeing any different here. I tried to read this part, but I didn't understand like what the difference is here. But you guys let me know if you see something. Private match, there is some updates here as to how you can set up a private match. Just UI updates. Use your legendary shards, guys. If you have thousands and thousands like I do, you want to buy an infinite amount of raid banners because that's like the only way you could use them. You could go to Rahul if you want to pick up some materials, but yeah, I'm gonna have thousands that are just gonna get wasted because I just don't have enough space to buy that many things. Then we have some Riven lore here for the Pantheon, just to kind of celebrate that final week. I'm still working on my final kill. We've had a lot of roadblocks happen this week, so I'm going to be getting to that right after I finish this right here. But we have Nezarec, who's giving a lot of people problems. And yeah, this poster is sick. This looks like a displate poster, so I'm probably going to buy this. Probably put it behind me here. Looks sick. All the Pantheon bosses. And yeah, guys, that is it. I'm sweating right now. Like that was a lot of reading, and I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm going to cut it down as short as I can. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Let me know if you liked it. Feel free to join the Discord if you want to hang out with me or a bunch of other cool people while I'm off stream or not making videos. Feel free to do so. You are welcome, and I will see you there or the next video or the next live stream. So see ya.